Hey guys, this is Adam Simon from Crowdcast, and we're very happy and privileged to announce that we're back for season 2 with a great team from the Cronulla Jazz and Blues Festival. And we can't wait to share more stories backstage with you with some of the legends, some of the up-and-comers, and some of the true fantastic musicians we're going to have the privilege to share the whole community down in the Shire. That's right, down in Cronulla from May 28th, later this month. So part of our very special retrospective into what we have here is we're going to share with you a very special chat we had with Jeff and Ron King of the fantastic Foreday Riders. This was a special interview that was helped organised for me by the great team from the Sydney Blues Society, and I sat down with the brothers for nearly an hour and got some great insights to share about their legendary careers and where they started playing, and some fantastic memories. It certainly brought back a lot of memories for me, and also, you know, I could tell really special moment for the brothers to share together and with all of you as part of this fantastic music community we have here. So settle in. Thanks again to the Sydney Blues Society. Thanks again to the Cronulla Jazz and Blues Festival, Code One, everyone that's been part of this. It's a fantastic opportunity. We got more great interviews to come. All the fantastic, as many of the artists we have, and we're also going to be down in the Shire filming and getting you as much great content and sharing for those around, not just the country, but around the world who love this amazing thing we call music, jazz, blues. Sit back and enjoy my very special part 1 of part 2 interview, part 1 with Jeff and Ron King, the Foreday Riders. We're here today for the debut episode of the Sydney Blues Society podcast, where we're going to dive deep into the history, the passion, the stories behind the greatest blues artists in Australia, and why not start with 2 of the icons. Before we get there, don't forget, I'm your host, Adam Simon, and today I'm beyond excited to be talking with 2 true legends, not just of the Australian blues scene, but the Australian music industry. Jeff and Ron King from the Foreday Riders. I mean, these guys have been at the forefront Australian blues for decades, carving out a legacy that's inspired generations. We're going to catch up with that generation soon. But first, we're going to chat with the boys about their incredible journey, the band's evolution, and their love for blues and everything that comes with it. Jeff and Ron, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Adam.
Let's start. I always like to quote the great, it's Rodgers and Hammerstein really, but Marie Von Trapp. Let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. You've been part of the Australian blues scene for so long. How did the Foreday Riders first come together?
Pretty simple. There's a bunch of school friends. Some of them were getting into folk music and that sort of related musics. But this is, I'm talking about the sort of early to mid-60s. And the British blues boom came about. Yeah. Rolling Stones, Yardbirds, Kinks, Animals. That got us, our ears pricked up. And all of us liked it. And at that stage, Jeff was already playing guitar in a sort of contemporary pop sort of stuff with a piano player. But I had a friend who played guitar, and he was in the folk scene more or less, or into folk music. But he knew that we liked blues. He also liked blues. And he knew that I liked the sound of the harmonica in those English bands. Mm-hmm. It was usually, with them, it was just used more or less as a sound effect, but it was effective. He said, why don't you give harp a go? And I thought, it's not going to break me to buy one and try it out. So once I started trying to play it, I realised that there was more to it than I would have expected. Yeah. And I couldn't just do it by picking up a weekend, so I had to sort of keep at it. And eventually was able to get a sound out of it. Yes. And then Jeff and I have always worked together, working on lines and with this John Murphy, who was a school friend, and a few others. We started the usual lounge room rehearsals, trying to get a few blues and rhythm and blues things together. Yeah. And it just developed from that point. Jeff got a girlfriend who enjoyed singing, And she ended up singing with the band.
And he's still singing with us.
We have so many times I talk to a lot of musicians, not just in the blues, but in the country and rock scene and so on, and their family influence growing up has played an impact. What type of music were you brought up around? Mum and Dad were musicians at all? Or?
Yeah, we've always had a piano in the house.
Yeah.
And Mum...
That was quite common back then too, to have a piano, wasn't it?
Yeah. Mum played by reading music, but Dad had an ear for music and just played naturally. And he actually got into boogie and got Ron involved. Ron can sort of tinker it.
Yeah. Never lost my love of piano boogie.
Yeah.
So,
and it sort of grew from there, you know.
But as kids, we grew up with rock and roll.
Yeah.
Early rock and roll.
Early rock and roll. So
Elvis, Gene Vincent, Joey Lee Lewis, Little Richard.
All those Sun guys.
The real thing.
I always look at someone like Little Richard. We're talking about history today, you know. Someone like Little Richard to be an African American man in that America, you know, in the 50s and 60s, singing in Tutti Frutti. He says, everyone thought it was about candy, you know, and it was.
Oh, yeah.
And then we had like the chess guys, you know, and Chuck Berry was there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Bo Diddley.
Yeah. I remember even Chuck Berry was saying like he got arrested for having a drink with a white woman in a car park. He says, well, hang on, go and hunt down my good friend Jerry Lee Lewis, who's married his 13-year-old cousin.
Everybody saw them.
The times certainly changed then. You learned music in school as well at that time? Or was that after school?
No.
Neither of us are readers.
Mm-hmm.
We've learned a bit about theory just so we know what we're doing. And we sort of learned as we go.
Yeah.
And we've been lucky to play with guys who really know what they're doing.
Mm.
And we've learned a lot from all the guys who we've associated with. But in the early part of the band, everyone was more or less on an equal footing.
Mm.
A couple of them knew more about music than others.
Yeah.
I mean, Jeff and I were novices, but because we loved the sound of the music, we sort of worked at it. And as I say, learn as we go.
Yeah.
And it's a simple format, like 3 chords.
Yeah. But you hear that 3 chords not just in, say, American and English blues and Australian blues. You hear it also in things like, say, in Greek music, in that Rebecca style of music and so on. And so it can be still very universal around the world. You know, Europe can be such a strong marketplace for that as well. And it's had its foundations, I think, for hundreds of years prior to when it really emerged in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So we talk about a time, there's always that famous story of when Robert Johnson met the devil at the crossroads. Sold his soul to be able to play like that. Did you either of you have that devil moment? Not that you actually met the devil, but that aha moment in your life when you went, this is for me, this is something I identify with, and not just for the girls, you know, but for something you wanted to pursue as a career?
No, not the apologetic type like Robert Johnson. No, look, we grew up on rock and roll, then that's sort of late 50s, that started to fade away, the side of work, so it went very soft.
Yeah.
People like Pat Boone and Ricky Nelson. The folk thing started to happen.
Yeah.
And part of that we enjoyed, but skiffle.
Yeah.
And jug band music, and that we found was sort of related to what we like.
Mm.
And trad jazz.
Yeah.
We got very connected with some of the trad jazz people. And then the Beatles came along.
Yeah.
And we thought, well, that's very nice.
Mm.
That's a change. When we heard the Stones, we thought, that's where we're at.
That's you, right? Yeah.
Early Stones.
You mentioned the Beatles there. I mean, McCartney's roots, to a different extent to Harrison and Lennon as well, but McCartney's roots were in that skiffle music too. Like when he got that skiffle sessions, and he used to play there quite regularly and so on. So it's you identify quite a good foundation.
Well, they were sort of rock and roll. I think the Stones were more rhythm and blues, you know, but they both did what they did very well. And
the Stones were influenced so much by Muddy Waters.
From
those guys.
Yeah, and of course the usual story. The British were always more than happy to acknowledge all their influences. And when they're talking about Muddy Waters, Little Walter, Jimmy Waddington, all these exotic names from Chicago, we went and started hunting that stuff out. Once we heard the Chicago thing, we were sold.
Yeah. Still, the Chicago thing has such a legacy to it from history but it's still such a rich, vibrant, not only a hotbed of where music comes from, but the music itself, you can put it on for moments or seconds and it just lights you up. It's like people said the other day, what's your favourite movie? And I go, I can have the worst day of all time. I can sit down and watch the Blues Brothers film all the time.
Yeah.
And everything goes away. And that's through the music and the comedy and so on. So let's talk about origins, the name, Foreday Riders.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
It's a blues term, the 4-day ride, as in before day.
Yeah.
But it was a song written by Joe McShann, one of the great Kansas City piano players and band leaders. We took the name. It just sounded exotic to us, and also like a 4-day riders was like a sort of amorous adventurer.
Yeah.
And we thought none of us are like that. So we're using it ironically. And we just thought it was a colourful term. And it was following in the steps of people like the Stones, Canty, people who used blues titles, track titles for their name. I mean, others like Butterfield and Musselwhite who just used their own names.
Yeah.
We were a collective. Just went under the name of... Look, probably now we wouldn't choose a name like that, but it stuck.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's a testament to his legacy. You say you've done a similar thing to the Stones, where you've taken it from a blues element, and so on, and it's been for over 50 years now. So it's certainly a brand, and it's certainly a legacy that you're part of, not only for yourself and your family, but for the Australian music industry. It's definitely there.
It's funny. We used to actually do that song for Riders. We haven't done it for decades.
We promised we'll do it again.
I mean, we saw Joe McShann at the basement.
Right.
If you remember the basement.
I remember the basement.
A friend of ours, follower of the band, she said, there's some players here tonight from a band called the Foreday Riders. Could you do that song?
Yeah.
So he did it.
Yeah.
So.
It's funny how those little things, those little impromptu things come up, isn't it? I remember I was talking to George Washington, he was telling me about...
We know him.
Who's in the audience, and do you mind if I play a song? It's like, yeah, sure, go for your life. Little things, those impromptu things.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the Sydney blues scene. Let's fast forward a little bit into the 70s. What was the Sydney blues scene like then? Because from what I've heard, I was a young whippersnapper then, despite appearances. It was a truly special place. Not just the Sydney blues scene, but the Sydney music scene in general.
Yeah.
You could go pub to pub to pub.
Absolutely.
What were your memories of that scene, the music scene, and then the blues scene in that 70s period?
Well, it was just sort of vibrant. I mean, we were working like 2 or 3 nights a week. No problem, but...
Never a problem getting a gig, which is quite different to today.
And sometimes you might do 2 gigs in a night.
Yeah.
We had 2 regular nights residency in the one pub, and that's unheard of today.
Where was that?
That was the 3 weeks.
3 weeks
in the 70s. That pub used to have blues every night of the week.
Yeah.
It was packed every night of the week. People went to gigs then. That was what people did. They went out and drank and watched the band.
I remember going there, even when I was in uni, that was there. I remember going with my uni friends there. We saw the Bushwhackers there one night.
Yeah.
And it's the first place I met my hero, Guy Clark. It's a singer-songwriter from Texas. Little bar in Dr. Roselle. There was this Texas icon who I followed, my uncle followed. And it's like, we don't have places like that anymore, do we?
No, the whole culture's changed. I mean, people go to these huge events, the big dance parties and all that sort of stuff, but the little pub scene is not the same at all.
Why do you think that is? What's changed?
Look, I think there was a bit of a change when the drink drive laws came in.
Yep.
We used to see people leave French's, where we played for about 8 years up at Darlinghurst.
Yep.
We see people, they could hardly stand up. They get in their car, would just fall into their car, take off into the night, and you think, well, don't know whether I'll ever see him again. Yeah. So that started limiting a little bit. There was a recession, pokies came in, all these sort of home entertainments cropped up.
Yeah.
And the whole culture sort of changed over a couple of decades. The 80s it was still happening.
Yeah.
The 90s, you could start to feel the change.
I think a lot of the pubs were owned and managed by the owner.
Yes.
Then something happened where they got sold and a corporate would take over and...
Yeah, company takes over.
And just get someone to manage it.
Yeah.
And if they're not music related, they weren't interested.
It was easy to find a couple.
Yes, they all sort of knew the groove, you know, sweeping clean.
Yeah.
They would change everything, and we'd be out the door. But we had very long-lasting residencies. I mean, French we played for 8 years. The Clock and Fiddle we played for nearly 10 years.
Right.
That was, as Jeff said, when you've got the owner who's into music, running the phones. You know, that was the same with the first gig we ever had. John Huey's Wine Bar at the Rocks.
Yep.
He had jazz on, and John Murphy was quite a good hustler. Talked him into trying a bit of blues, and it worked really well.
History.
You know,
That Frenchies you mentioned, up in Darwin. That's costed so many most iconic bands. Chisel played there, we'll get to College Chisel in a second because I think they're a blues band in start and finish. But what are your memories of that? Because I heard it was I drew past where it was, and sort of like you drive past where it all was played in Vegas and so on. I know where this place is, and my father tells me about the stories of the famous Texas Tavern and things like that up and across. What are your memories of French's at the time? Because from what I heard, it was a wild place to be on a hot night.
Yeah, well, when we first started playing there, it was only on the top level, just a single room.
Yeah.
And over the years, they developed downstairs, and it ended up the main event was downstairs.
Yeah. But French is also a similar story to John Huey's in that Ray French had jazz.
Yes.
Dick Hughes playing piano and whatnot. He used to play before us, actually, sort of for the after-work crowd. Then we'd come on and do the rest of the night. But so there were very few straight-ahead blues bands around at the time, and we sort of slotted into that jazz scene more than anything. There were a lot of very good rhythm and blues bands around, but they weren't exclusively blues. They were sort of pop blues bands, and very good at what they did. But we were strictly blues, you know.
Is that something that you've had to balance throughout your careers, moving away from that blues genre into a more commercial, mainstream thing? Is that something you've had to balance, that commercial appeal? You just stayed hard and fast to your true foundation?
Just stayed with what we enjoy hearing. And
we've never had the need to sort of try to have a hit or be commercial.
Yeah. Because it's interesting, because I mentioned Cold Chisel before, and Cold Chisel is celebrating their 50th anniversary to start next week, and I've always said Cold Chisel were a blues band. Now, I still think the Doors were a blues band to start with, you know. But then they get, a record coming like Pick 'em Up, and then that commercial appeal comes, and you've got to make it a little bit more pop or rock.
And possibly money is involved. Yeah.
But I think then that is also then where the music might lose a bit of its, not I'm saying Cold Chisel, but other bands, for instance, might lose that authenticity because the money becomes involved.
Yeah.
And, well, I have to have the money because I owe the record company money, whereas you guys have stuck to your guns. And you've not had that issue where you owe a record company thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I think that's allowed you to stay true to your spirit that you found with your love of this music to start with. Is that something which you've been aware of? Because I certainly see as an outsider looking in, that's something I can identify very quickly.
We never felt any pressure to compromise, really.
And that's...
Well, I mean, there is a good blues scene, or has been in Sydney for a long time now, but when we started, we were very much on the fringe, at Plains, purest sort of blues, really.
Yeah. And we're seeing that resurgence now. I mean, I was talking to some months ago, we had the Cronulla Jazz and Blues Festival, we had a chat with you, and then I sort of got to dig in, and it's like, they've got these venues in Sydney, like Mr. Lee's and Butcher's Brew, and Leichhardt Bowling Club, and
that's a
Club, and so on. All these places, and I've started going to them a fair bit. Not that I needed more music to see. And it's Tuesday night. There's 50, 60 people here in the middle of winter. No other genre can really do that. And I'm trying to figure out, it's almost like that meaning of life, or when we had the box, $64,000 question, What do you think it is about that it keeps drawing audiences of all ages now too? I was with Mr. Lee 3 weeks ago, and the youngest person there was 15 or 16 with their family. The oldest person, they had a guy on their jam night, was 96 years old, I think that's it.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about blues as a genre that keeps finding new audiences and keeps it alive for generation and generation?
Look, it's sort of rhythm-based. People can't resist certain rhythms, foot tapping music.
Yeah.
And that's our sort of criterion, really.
Mm.
It's got to swing. Now, we've heard a lot of bands that they're playing 12-bar, you could say contemporary blues, but they don't keep the momentum going. It's a very stiff rhythm playing,
Yes.
and it changed the whole feel of it to us.
And I think that word, the feeling you mentioned, I just interviewed where you guys arrived with Lockie Dolly.
Lucky, yeah.
And so, it's Lockie, I said, I see you, and it's like when your fingers touch the keys, you can sort of see it running through your body, your lives and so on.
Yeah.
But I see that in you guys as well. And that's that spirit, and I think you're quite saying, if you get that electricity, you get that connection, that feeling from the music, that's what keeps it going for you, doesn't it? Whereas, say, if you play bands you mentioned, and you can tell it's very stiff.
Yeah.
The love goes very quickly. It's almost like a relationship, isn't it? You have to be connected, otherwise you drift apart.
Yeah. I mean, if you listen to the Muddy Waters band, you've got 7, maybe 8 guys playing,
And they're
all over each other, and yet not getting in each other's way, but they're always swinging.
that's what we endeavour to do.
Yeah, that's our aim,
I think that where the band has toured, I mean, you talk about Muddy Waters fans have a whole new career in Europe.
Yeah.
The US pretty sort of declined. Let's go through the places you guys have toured. You toured all over Australia.
Well,
Pretty much everywhere. Wonthaggi or Thargomindah are on the list. We've got to get there one day. So where have you toured in Australia? New South Wales?
Well, we've done a few gigs in Melbourne and whatnot.
we're
Queensland.
East Coast was
East Coast.
Who was
And out to Alice Springs.
that was the all-time favourite. The one and only Alice Springs.
And that's interesting to mention because I spent some time in Alice Springs in ENT a couple of years ago, and especially in the Indigenous community, there's a strong love of blues music.
Yeah.
And again, you see how people dance and the communities come together and so on. What were your memories of playing in Alice Springs? When was that about? Do you remember?
Well, there were a lot of beer cans.
Yeah, and over. We need to in beer cans. They could drink on there.
Aside the big things, what do you remember about playing the music and something in the audience? Good times singing and dancing along?
Well, it was a real event for us because it was such an experience flying out there in a little 16-seater.
The way it came about was Matt Taylor from Chain sat in with us one night, and the other night he said to me, "So I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to tell this guy Hector out in Alice Springs about you guys, and see if I can get you on this festival out there." This is Matt Taylor. Well, he's having me on. This Hector from Alice Springs.
Yeah.
Anyway, next week I get a call from Hector at Alice Springs. He says, "We're talking to Matt, and I'd like to get you up here for the Blues Festival." I thought, he's going to come to Alice Springs to a Blues Festival. Anyway, he flew. He had Renee Gayer, the Bunter Band, the whole whole stream of people, all flown up there on charter flights for the weekend.
Yeah. But it's something about the population. I lived in Darwin for 6 months. And there's an Australian population, but there's a tourist population, like backpacking and so on. There's live music 7 nights a week.
Really?
And then they had the entertainment centre there, and it's a 1,000-seater. And they had, Jim Bob and the roller sounds of the super 70s. Thing sells out. $70 a ticket. So I talked to the manager at the centre, I said, people just love entertaining. They don't get the big concerts like Springsteen comes. He doesn't go to Darwin. He said they just love entertainment. They don't care who's on. It's a night out. And I think that's where that spirit of the 70s, where we all used to have a night out, has been lost in Sydney. But thankfully, it's coming back through this resurgence of these venues, especially in the blues scene. Let's talk about songwriting and the creative process, and when you kind of create music together. Do you work together or
less?
Yeah.
I normally get lyrics together and some idea of a format, 16 bar or 12, and the feel. Is it a rumba or a shuffle? I talk to Jeff about it, and he always comes up with some appropriate guitar part. Then we'll record it, just a lounge room recording acoustically.
Yeah.
Jeff on guitar and me playing harp and putting in a vocal. Then we put it to the guys. These guys all know what they're doing, and they always come up with something appropriate. And there's a few trial runs and gigs.
It's really like bring a plate. Everyone brings their own little element to it. So,
but Jeff's also come up with some very nice instrumentals. He doesn't know where he got them from, but
no, they just happened.
And he said, "Oh, can you find a line to go with this?" And he's got some interesting rhythmic thing happening. So I'll try to come up with some line to fit it. That's how we work our songs out. Yeah.
From a song point of view, I asked this of Neil Diamond many years ago. I had a chance to meet him because his music stayed with me. And I want to ask you, from the legacy of music you have and the history behind it, do you have to be sad to write a blues song? Do you have to be happy to write a happy song, or is it just what you find when it comes together?
Look, usually there's some phrase or expression that I come across, and I'll think that'll make a good topic for a blues. Then with me, it doesn't happen overnight. It just sort of this idea evolves, and it's got to, obviously the feel has got to be appropriate to the idea or the expression. And that's where Jeff comes in, and I say, "Hey, can you get a nice little Chicago shuffle going behind this?" Most of the stuff I write, not all straight 12 bars, but they're all based on blues changes. So they're all very much in the vein of a 12 bar. Yeah.
One of the key things that, you've been able to stay true to your blues roots throughout your entire career, but still bringing new innovation, new sound, sometimes new players, things like that. How is that really important to you as the founders of the band, to balance that tradition whilst also continuing to evolve and stay fresh?
Yeah, well, we often sort of look for numbers where we can utilise slide guitar, because that introduces another aspect, But yeah, I think it's the innovation thing is so important.
Yeah. Especially now, because technology, what you were saying, technology changed so much, not just from a recording point of view, what you can do with the instruments and desks and production, and you can still have those classic analog desks that you can't beat. But then you've also got to face technology in the commercial sense now. We have streaming, you would have seen come in, and vinyls has resurgence all of a sudden. We're buying vinyl again, and even the friend of mine's in Nashville at the moment, she said, "Oh, cassettes are back in Nashville."
Really?
And so on.
That's hard to believe.
It's a funny thing. It's
not the most user-friendly thing.
What's old is new again, I suppose. So,
yeah.
How have you, and that's important. And I think that's something which I think people who are musicians like the legacy you guys have understand that. But a lot of young musicians now, I think they just go, "Well, I'll just take the shortcut route." But they need to understand and learn from people like yourself. And I think that's where you've been really generous with your time, because you've worked with so many young musicians.
Yeah.
When you see someone like a Ray Beadle,
who
you played with a few times and so on, and you see him come up and become the musician that he is and the renown that he has. Does that give you a validation feeling or a warm feeling?
Yeah. He regards us as his uncles. Yeah. No, Ray actually played in the band for 8 years.
Yeah.
So.
And then we had a trio going with him, and we're still working with him quite. He often does shows with the Riders.